Today we are talking about a guy whom I really didn't think we'd be having this kind of a discussion about him ever, but I guess this could be seen as a reminder that just because a player is good and he looks to be good does not necessarily mean that he will always be good. Okay, that's a terrible sentence. I didn't really think that one through, but today we're going over to the Buffalo Sabres once again and talking about yet another one of their younger guys. We've already talked about Tage Thompson. We've got some other conversations going on about other players, Dahlin, Power, Mittelstadt, but when it comes to one of the guys that I thought was going to be more so of a steal for this team, he was taken back in the 2019 NHL Entry Draft in the 17th overall spot, and his name is Peyton Krebs. Now, Krebs, if you have been following the channel for the past 4 or 5 years-ish, was a guy that I was super high on back in the 2019 draft season. If you remember the videos we made, the Why I Want series, we talked about Krebs, and we went over his entire profile multiple times. Long story short, in the WHL, Peyton Krebs had himself a boatload of points, 68 points in 64 games played. He was a minus 50, but that's because the Kootenay Ice were not great in this time frame. But Krebs still made himself known as one of the better playmakers, skaters. He was so fast, so quick out there. His work ethic was unmatched. One of the hardest working motors in the entire 2019 draft belonged to Peyton Krebs, and combined with his playmaking and speed, it made for a very interesting profile. Back in this time frame in 2019, the lowest ranking on paper belonged to TSN and Bob McKenzie. They had him at number 10. McKean's had him at 8. Future Considerations and Elite Prospects had him at 6. Now, NHL Central Scouting actually had him at number 10 on their North American list, which means that's about like a 16, 17-ish range if you combine the Europeans into one. But despite this ranking, most people thought that Peyton Krebs, who at the time was only 5'11", he's 6 feet tall flat now, people thought it was going to be a top 10 pick. But of course, as we had already talked about in the intro, he was not taken in the top 10, he was taken 17th, so he slipped a lot. A lot of people could chalk that up to, hey, maybe it's because he's small, translatable skills, whatever. But at the end of the day, in my opinion at least, the Vegas Golden Knights had an absolute steal of a pick. Just take the high-scoring WHL guy that was supposed to go a lot higher, and you're probably going to be happy. Well, give it a few years after Peyton Krebs makes his debut in the NHL, he's up and down between the Henderson Silver Knights and the Vegas Golden Knights. He eventually gets traded over to Buffalo in the Jack Eichel trade, and in this most recent season of play, Krebs has 26 points in 74 games played, 9 goals, 17 assists. This was his first full season in the NHL exclusively because last year in 21-22, he played a bunch of games in the AHL up and down, etc. He was really good in the AHL, point per game guy for Rochester and over a point per game for the Henderson Silver Knights. But Peyton Krebs has himself a season in 22-23 that some people could go out there and say was kinda disappointing. He is only 22 years old, and as we said, this is only his second year in the league, so 26 points in 74 games might not seem like the worst thing in the world, but I did want to direct your attention to a few articles and a few conversations that have been brought up as a result. Starting out with this, a few days ago on Fansided, this is SaberNoise.com, so the Buffalo version of Fansided, you had Sion Fox go out there and write this: Buffalo Sabres 75 bold predictions for 2023-2024, prediction number 18. Peyton Krebs may have found his role with the Buffalo Sabres in 22-23, and he'll expand upon it in 23-24 as a defensive forward. The bold prediction here says that Peyton Krebs will get 25-plus assists in 23-24. While it's tough to imagine Krebs scoring 25 points total because he had 26 last year, playing primarily a defensive forward role in the fourth line, it's possible nonetheless, not because of a scoring sequence with Okposo and Girgensons, but with him being a sequence starter. Krebs should be doing this more often in 23-24, and with a high-octane scoring line entering the ice after he recovers puck possession, quick sequences are likely. Now, that's just one writer's hot take on how Krebs' season is going to go. Let's go out there and read an analysis done by Scott Wheeler on The Athletic. Take a look at this article also from a few days ago. NHL prospects I was wrong about: Jan Mysak, Tyler Kleven, Peyton Krebs, and more. This article was published on August 17th, and as with the Buffalo Sabres piece on sabernoise.com, links are going to be in the description if you want to read the entire articles in its entirety. But this is what Wheeler goes out there and writes about in regards to Krebs and how he was wrong about him. This is not screenshotted from The Athletic. This is actually from Reddit, because the Buffalo Sabres sub had the article posted onto it and then somebody copied and pasted it into the comments. Take a look at this. In Scott Wheeler's final draft ranking in 2019, he had Peyton Krebs at the 6th overall spot. The write-up says this: Krebs made his NHL debut, led the WHL in points, was named WHL Player of the Year, and played to a point-per-game stint in the AHL at 20. At 21, he became a full-time NHL player. This year, the 22-year-old will be a top 9 player on a Sabres team that has playoff aspirations, maybe even as a center. He's going to be a solid NHL player for a long time, and has followed the timeline as you would hope a first-round pick would. But why is he on this list? Because he still looks more like the kind of player you'd look to draft at number 17 than at number 6, where I had him ranked. Wheeler says that ahead of the 2019 draft, I fell in love with his combination of speed, skill, playmaking, and work ethic, arguing that his more modest 1.06 points per game and a minus 50 rating was more so because he was on a dreadful Kootenay team, an argument that was supported by the 40% of the team's goals he was in on. And while he was more than those things, his specific toolkit is one I've always been too fond of in the past. In each of those ways, he actually profiled a lot like Alex Turcotte, another high pick I was too high on in retrospect, and in both cases, their lack of natural finishing ability limited their upside and should have kept them out of the top 10 range on my lists. I still really like Krebs as a player, Wheeler writes. He's hard not to like, but profiles like his are ones I'm now more leery of than I once was, if only because while they usually produce good players, they're missing the scoring punch needed to be a star, unless the playmaking game is truly elite, which in Krebs and Turcotte's case, it wasn't/isn't quite there. Now that's a pretty bleak scouting report. I mean, I get it, Wheeler is still saying that he sees value in what Krebs is able to do, but realistically, when you talk about what Krebs has in store here, I see a lot of Sabres fans, especially on the subreddit, talking about how a lot of his production this previous season was held back by line mates, how the fact that he was playing with Kyle Okposo and Zemgus Girgensons, who weren't really doing too much to give this guy the proper point production on the board. The Sabre Noise piece was also posted onto the subreddit. This is what Tactical Snail goes out there and says, could Peyton Krebs get 30 points? Yeah, easily, if his line mates aren't Okposo and Zemgus Girgensons. I thought he had a lot of great passes throughout the year that someone more offensively skilled probably would have scored on. And also the deployment helps too, because if he's on the 4th line, he probably won't get to that 30 point mark, So, at the end of the day, when it comes to Peyton Krebs, there's a lot good here that makes him an NHL player. It's just whether or not that takes him to the ceiling that we thought he had back when he was producing a bunch of points and was a top premier playmaker in the WHL in 2019, we'll have to wait and see. Of course, he's only 22 years old, there's still a lot more time for him to develop and become a good player. It's just going to be tough doing that when you have names on top of you that are also pretty young and are also exhibiting pretty good playmaking skills too. I don't know about you, but hey, Casey Middlestad, that guy's looking pretty good, and we just made a video about him the other day. Of course, you can't go wrong with the Thompson, Tuck, and Skinner first line. There are some other names that can really make an impact on this team, but Krebs is one that I'm wanting to see more out of. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. How do you feel about this entire story, the progress from being drafted by Vegas to getting traded to Buffalo, and seeing the progression from the Rochester Americans last year to what we had seen in the full 22-23 season? What are your expectations for Krebs heading forward? Do you think he can hit 30 points? Do you think it really depends on who he plays with? And where do you think he fits into this lineup next year? Thoughts in the comment section below about Peyton Krebs. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.